Hi everybody, it's Christopher and welcome to Life's Not Over, It Just Looks Different on YouTube. In today's video, I want to talk about something that I really enjoyed from my early days of my sight loss, and that was learning Braille. As I mentioned in one of my previous videos, I worked with a rehabilitation specialist, now known as an independent living skills specialist. And while she was teaching me things like marking appliances, strategies for matching clothing, and how to stay a little bit more organized as a person with sight loss, she also asked me if I wanted to learn Braille. She said it might come in handy for things like when I'm on an elevator or for maybe marking things around the house, and she suggested maybe marking my CD collection. So I thought, okay, sure, let's do that. The very first thing she handed me was a brochure that talked about Braille, and I remember feeling the bumps on the page and thinking, I'm not going to get this. But I didn't back out. She came to my house with a Braille textbook, and the Braille in the textbook was a little bigger than normal, or a little bigger than what's used in books and stuff like that, to really develop the tactile sense and feel the difference between the dots. The first thing she had to teach me was about the Braille Cell, because the Braille Cell is, of course, 6 dots, as most people know, but the dots are numbered 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, so that if I'm talking to somebody else about Braille, or if they're talking to me and they say, what dots make up the letter B, I can say, oh, it's 1 and 2. And I don't have to describe, oh, well, upper left and middle left and anything like that. It's way easier to do it by numbers. And in fact, I was at a company meeting about a year ago, and our CEO decided to have a little bit of fun with everybody from the company. And he said, I'm going to give you a message in Braille. And from his spot at the front of the room, he started just reciting off a bunch of numbers, which I scrambled to write down because I can't keep track of what he was saying in my head and keep it all organized. So I wrote it all down. And then I was able to figure out, just based on those numbers, what the letters were so that I could figure out the message. I basically cracked the code. And so that was kind of fun. So it's really good to know the dots 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, so that you can then know the dot combinations and be able to tell them to somebody else, or somebody can tell you, and you know how to compose those letters. Once I learned the Braille Cell, then it was time to start learning the letters. So, the book started very methodically, letter A, letter B, letter C, and as we moved further along, it started to make words using the letters that I had learned so that I could start to get a sense of how it all came together. And I learned all of the letters A through J, and that's when I've learned about the pattern to Braille. And this is one of the reasons why I really like Braille, is because it's a pattern. You have the letters A through J and all of their dot combinations, and then the very next thing you have for the letters K through T, it's the same dot combinations as A through J, except now we add dot 3 to everything. So all of the letters A through J use the upper dots, 1, 2, 4, and 5, and then K through T start to incorporate dot 3 with all of those combinations. And then after T, of course, we have U through Z, which now employs dots 3 and 6 to form the rest of the letters. With one little exception. If you're looking at these ones here on the screen, you're looking at the U through Z, you'll notice that W doesn't fit the pattern. And there's a reason for that. Way back when Louis Braille was coming up with Braille and coming up with the consistent patterns and the letters and dots combinations, the letter W didn't exist in the French alphabet. So he didn't add it. So that's why it's out of sequence as far as following the pattern that all of the other letters follow. And so that one can be a little bit tricky to wrap your head around, or at least I found it tricky in my early days because W was out of sequence. But eventually I figured out, okay, well, it's just sort of the mirror image of R, and away we go. So that's how the letters, all the letters of the alphabet work. And then it was time to learn about punctuation, because if you're going to start writing anything in Braille, you have to know how to end your sentences, whether you're going to use a period, a question mark, an exclamation mark, whatever it is you're going to use. Maybe you're going to use an apostrophe. Maybe you're going to use a comma. All of these things have a Braille dot or dot combination to be able to do that. We can't just follow along and do everything in Braille and then put a little dot at the end of the sentence to suggest that that's a period, like we would if we're writing the English language, because that would look like a dot 3 to somebody reading Braille, and they'd wonder why there's an apostrophe at the end of every sentence. So that doesn't make any sense. So the period in Braille is dots 2, 5, and 6. And that's how you know that that's the end of the sentence. Also, when you're learning Braille, another thing that you have to learn is the numbers. 1 through 9 and then 0. And basically for that, again, is where A to J comes in really handy, because the numbers 1 through 9 and 0 are the same as the dot combinations for the letters A through J, except that in Braille, we use what is known as the Braille number sign. So the next time you're on an elevator, take a look for this. And when you're looking at the Braille on the elevator, you'll notice that there's this backwards L shape, which is the number sign, or what is now, I guess, more commonly known as a hashtag, but it's the number sign in Braille. So you'll see that, and then you'll see dots after it to tell you what floor you're on. So if you want to go to the 3rd floor, you're going to need number 3, which of course is the 3rd letter of the alphabet, letter C. So you'll see the Braille number sign, and then you'll see dots 1 and 4 after it, and that's how you find the 3rd floor. After you've learned all of the numbers and all of the letters and some of the punctuation, there's one other thing about Braille that you have to learn, or that I had to learn, is that there are no upper and lowercase letters like there are when we're typing or writing in the English language. There's no capital A in Braille, and there's no capital or lowercase a in Braille. What we do instead is we use little dot 6. Here it is all by itself. Little dot 6 represents that whatever follows it is capitalized. So if I'm going to write my name, I'm going to start with a dot 6, and then for the letter C, I'm going to put in dots 1 and 4, which is the letter C. That lets people know that the first letter of my name is capitalized. And if I wanted to capitalize my whole name for whatever reason, if I needed to yell it out in print, as we now see when we see all uppercase letters, it looks like somebody's yelling at us. If I wanted to do that, I can put dot 6, and then type my name in all of the Braille dots, and that lets them know that my whole name is capitalized for whatever reason. Occasionally when I'm writing Braille, I do have a bit of a momentary pause where I'm trying to remember a particular dot combination, and so I do air dots, trying to figure out and sort of visualize the 6 dots in my head and go, oh, okay, yeah, that is that, okay? Or the other thing I can do, and I love that Apple has come up with this, if you've watched some of my other videos about the technology I use, you know that I'm a really big fan of the iPhone because of all of the accessibility features that are built into it. But one of the things I really enjoy is that it has a Braille screen input. So I know people who actually type Braille on their phones when they're sending texts and stuff like that. So if I'm actually stuck for a particular letter, what I can do, and I'm going to turn the volume up here a little bit, but what I can do is I can actually start tapping the dots,
comma, apostrophe,
and it'll tell me what would form if I hit that particular dot combination. So it's kind of a handy little thing to be able to use if I'm struggling to remember what a particular dot combination is, or where I find that I'm often tripped up is in the punctuation that I don't use very often, like the apostrophe or the comma. I know that one is dot 2 and the other is dot 3, and sometimes I have to go back into my phone and just tap that dot to have the phone tell me which one it is. So it's a real little memory tool and helpful little tool that if I'm composing something in Braille, I don't have to call up a friend to tell me what it is. I've got my friend right in my phone to be able to tell me what dots I need in order to compose it. Like I said early on, one of the things that I talked about with my Braille instructor was about marking my CDs. So I've got good Canadian band here, Chilliwack, and on the label I did the Braille that says Chilliwack. And I've done that for basically all of the CDs in my collection. That was way back when. But if I ever nowadays lose my vision, I'll still be able to find those CDs. Provided, of course, the right CD is in the right case, because I didn't actually label the discs. I only labeled the cases. But at least, I'll be able to find the discs, and I can find them even in the dark. I could find the right CD if I was looking for it. As I was learning to read Braille, I was also learning how to write Braille. And one of the things that my Braille instructor gave me in order to learn how to write the Braille is she gave me this little slate and stylus. So there's this tiny little pointy object here, and you've got this to punch all the dots, and you punch them all in there. So you take a piece of paper, and I've done this a few times, so there's already a few holes punched in this paper. But you take this piece of paper, pop it in here. It's got little knobs to hold the page in place. And then when you go to do it, you're punching all of the dots in here. Now this is not regular Braille paper. This is just regular printer paper, which is thinner than Braille paper because you need a sturdier paper to actually be able to form the dots and hold the dots. But there's something else that I learned when I was learning to write Braille or compose Braille, is that in order to be able to read Braille from left to right, as we do in the English language, in order to be able to read it from left to right on the page, you have to be able to punch it into the page from right to left, so that when you turn it back over, you can actually read what you've written. So not only did I have to learn all of the dot combinations for all of the letters, I then had to learn how to form them all, or get my head around how to form them all going in the reverse order, so that when I turned the page back over, I could actually read what I had written. So that was a bit of a learning experience as well, to be able to not only read the Braille and feel it with my finger, but then to be able to memorize all of the dot combinations the other way, so that I could then be able to write Braille. And these days, all these years later, because it's been about 16 years since my sight loss, I actually write Braille much better than I read it, because I know all the dot combinations in my head. I've got them all memorized, so I can compose the Braille, but I don't use it. It's like a language, and if you don't use it, you lose it. So I just really haven't been practicing, and I haven't developed that tactile sense to be able to read with my finger, or fingers, as some people do. Some very experienced Braille readers can read with more than one finger at once, which just blows my mind. It's an incredible thing to watch as far as I'm concerned. Good on them. I can read it. I'm just very slow at it. So if I'm composing something in Braille, I can then turn the page over and read what I've written. A little slow at it, but I know what I've written, or I know what it should be, so I can also feel those dots and make sure that I did it correctly. But that is sort of the add-on skill that I had to learn, not just reading the Braille, but also to be able to write the Braille. That is everything I wanted to talk about in today's video. I thank you very much for watching. I really do appreciate each and every one of you who watches these videos. Thank you so much for doing so. And if you are new to the channel, you've never seen these before, if you wouldn't mind hitting the subscribe button down below, why not come on this journey with me? I've got a lot of videos that I've already done, mostly on my life with cortical visual impairment and my life with sight loss, but also a few other things as well, because as I've expressed in a few videos, I'm more than just my sight loss. So occasionally I show some of the other interests in my life. But I do want to thank you very much for watching, and I hope you have a wonderful day.